Hi, I'm Judy Gallagher, and I'd like to tell you today about Beauty and the Bees. The photographs in this presentation were taken by me, and the drawings were done by my talented artist husband, Jimmy. The beauty here is a wildflower. In the early spring, the forest floor is carpeted with tiny white flowers called spring beauties. Spring beauties like woodland edges, although they are also sometimes found in fields. Spring beauty's scientific name is Claytonia virginica, named after John Clayton, an 18th century Virginia botanist. The brown clump in the middle of this picture is the root or tuber of the spring beauty, also known as cerry spuds. They supposedly taste just like potatoes when cooked, but it would take a large number of these to make a meal and it kills the plant, so don't try this at home. When you see the flowers like this, they look small and white. But up close, it's a different story. Spring beauties come in a range of colors, from almost white through deeper shades of pink, and sometimes even in a yellowish orange. I've only seen the yellowish orange spring beauties once, but pink and white ones are common and are often found in the same patch. Here's one that is almost white. You can see faint pink lines radiating from the tips of the petal to the center of the flower. These are called nectar guides, and they point pollinators toward the plant's reward, typically either nectar or pollen or both. Here are some flowers that are a much deeper pink. I mentioned before that pinkish and whitish flowers are often found in the same patch. Why would this happen? Wouldn't one flower color be more advantageous to a plant's survival? As it turns out, the answer is complicated. Whitish flowers contain more chemical compounds called flavanols than pinkish flowers. Flavanols make the plant less tasty to herbivores or plant eaters. This means that plants with white flowers have a greater chance of reproducing than plants with pink flowers. On the other hand, pink flowered plants produce more seeds, so they should have a reproductive advantage. To complicate the situation even further, slugs seem to prefer plants with pink flowers. And there's a fungus that mostly likes plants with white flowers. It seems as if it's good to have both white and pink flowered plants. Spring beauty flowers open when the temperature is 52 degrees or higher. The flowers close at night when there aren't many pollinators flying, and they are also usually closed when it's rainy, as the nectar would likely be diluted by rainwater. So who pollinates spring beauty flowers? Pollination is usually a mutually advantageous arrangement where the plant gets pollinated in exchange for providing the pollinator with something it wants, typically nectar and/or pollen. Spring beauty's nectar has sugar that corresponds to the needs of medium to short-tongued bees and flies. A native bee, the spring beauty mining bee, is the most effective pollinator of spring beauties. It starts flying when the temperature is 55 degrees, just after the flowers have opened. You can see that this spring beauty mining bee's pollen baskets on its hind legs are loaded with pink pollen that it will take home to its nest. Yet it also has some on its head and thorax, which will likely rub off on the next flower it visits. Spring beauty bees make their burrows or mines in leaf litter, and I haven't been fortunate enough to find one yet, but I continue to look. As the name suggests, all mining bees live underground in burrows that they excavate. The bee in this picture is not a spring beauty mining bee, but it shows a different species of mining bee entering its burrow with a load of pollen. The female bee excavates a burrow with multiple chambers. She deposits an egg in each chamber, along with a ball of pollen to act as food for the larva. You may notice another similarly small but more brightly colored bee hanging around near spring beauties. It may nectar on the spring beauties and accidentally pollinate them, but it doesn't collect pollen for its young. The nomad or cuckoo bee is looking for the burrows of the spring beauty mining bee or any other mining bee species. If it finds a burrow, it will excavate into it and lay an egg in the pollen. The cuckoo bee larva eats the mining bee larva and then eats the pollen that the spring beauty mining bee has provided. Here you can see the tail end of the nomad bee disappearing into the mining bee's burrow. Spring beauty mining bees are the most common pollinator of spring beauties, but the second most common pollinator is the bee fly, a fly that looks a lot like a bee. If you look closely, you can see pollen grains sticking to this fly's hairy body. You can see that this dance fly has pollen on it that it will likely transfer to another spring beauty. Other insects are attracted to spring beauties. Here is a cabbage white nectaring on a spring beauty, but it is not an effective pollinator of it. The white M-hair streak is also not an effective pollinator. And nor are ants, as they don't usually brush up against the pollen. Ants do play a role in the spring beauty's life cycle, though. Spring beauty seeds have an elaiosome attached, which is a small fleshy body that ants like to eat. The ants take the seeds with elaisomes back to their nests, eat the elaiosome, and discard the seed in their trash area. This spreads spring beauty seeds to new areas. I hope these pictures and stories have given you an even greater appreciation of what goes on in the woods in early spring. Thanks for listening to the story of spring beauty and the bees.